You see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So last time we've talked about 7 basic tool that is used for quality control. I just want to list them because we already gone through them. Cause and effect diagrams, which uses fishbone or Ishikawa diagram, and this is the diagram. How is it dividing the the areas to training hardware, software, user, and try to dig to the issues based on a question why. You have to keep asking why until you reveal the root cause of the problem. Second tool is a quality control chart. It's used to prevent defect rather than detect the defects, and it uses the 7 run rules, and the diagram here shows that we have the mean, and for an application that is we give an example of a manufacturer that manufacture a ruler which is 12 inches. If the rulers the acceptable margin of error is from 11.9 inch to 12.10 inch, and the mean is a 12. If there is 7 consecutive um, point that run under the mean or over the rule, that mean we have to examine the quality control process and revise it then. And also uh, uh, the fourth is run chart, then scatter diagrams, and we talked about histograms, and we talked about Pareto chart, and also flow charts, and we stopped actually in flow chart, and we want to continue with different methods of equality by statistical sampling. What is statistical sampling? Uh, Basically, statistical sampling is the method of using statistic to identify the issues or quality of a product. And it's a key concept basically in project management equality using statistical sampling. And the members of the project team focus on the quality must have strong understanding of statistics. At least uh, 1 or 2 members must have a strong statistical understanding. But other project team may need to have only basic concept of statistical, but there is necessity for 1 or 2 team member from the project has to must know strong understanding of statistics. And concept of statistical sampling or certainty factor, standard deviation, and variability, which I would explain in a minute. That is are all important aspects to understand. Uh, Standard deviation and variability are the fundamental concept of understanding quality control charts. كلنا سمعنا عن standard deviation. مظبوط. The standard deviation is the point that is above or lower the mean that are acceptable or we measure within. Uh, the statistical sampling involves choosing part of population of interest to study or inspect. The size of the sampling depends how you want the representation to be. The sample size is measured by this formula that you see in the slide is 0.25 times certainty factor divided by acceptable error, and certainty factor divided by acceptable error, and this is squared. And we'll explain this in a minute. What is certainty factor? Certainty factor. Certainty factor.
دكتور ممكن تعيد السؤال؟
تفضل أنا. Certainty factor. طب تعرفوا what is the standard deviation؟ ايش هو standard deviation؟
It's مجموعة data. إنه basically if you're one standard deviation away from the mean on either side, you're representing the data, maybe 60% of the data. كيف I know it in concept وبعرف أحل عليها بس مش عارف to explain it in simple terms يعني.
Can we define it in the way is the degree of deviation from the mean? The degree of the deviation from the mean?
Which is the variation?
The variation from the mean. Plus or minus. And the certainty factor is how certain you want to be that the sample data does not include variation that is not existed in the whole population. Let me give you an example. Suppose everything with example can be explained better. Suppose that we have a company want to develop an EDI, which is electrical data exchange system handling invoice data from different suppliers. And the company receives, let's say, 50,000 invoice from different supplier. Let's say 200 supplier. So الكمباني receive 50,000 invoice بالسنة من 200 different suppliers. If as a developer you wanted to develop ال EDE اللي هو electronic data exchange to be able to process these invoices electronically, you don't deal with the paper-based invoices. You want to study how to measure the quality for such an application. As a developer, ماشي, it will be time consuming and very expensive to review each and every invoice to determine the data requirement for the new system. And I lived this experience and with this example, لأني for the last 7 years, I worked for the company who implemented EDE system. And I've seen the pain where we receive invoices that is we interpreted in our application, because sometimes we get the invoices as PDF file. The application EDE has an OCR that has to reach certain fields, and which fields are important to the system to be able to process it. When you receive invoices from different supplier, each supplier has its own design of the invoice. An invoice as a PDF sometimes it has invoice number. Do I take the invoice number as the key to store it in my EDE system, or invoice routing number? Some other suppliers call invoice routing number as the key for their invoice. So how I wanted to process these data to unify these all process from the 200 suppliers to be able to process them electronically. So it is big, big, big hustle. So I had to examine how I interpreted this data into my EDE system. Uh, Given that number, the total number of invoices, for example, 5 or 50,000 invoices, it will be a cumbersome for our developer or analysts to go over each invoice and determine what database I have to intercept into my system to be able to develop this application. This is I'm doing this trying to improve the quality, improve the time, improve the development, so that I don't have to have a lot of changes in the application further when I implement it. So I have to study by using ish sampling. If the developer uses statistical technique اللي احنا بنحكي عنه هلا, they might find that they could study maybe 100 invoice only and have a good sample of the type of the data they need. They don't study the 50,000 invoice. That's why sampling is very important to measure the quality, in order to measure the quality of the developed system. Okay? And I don't want to go into the details much. I just want to give you an idea because it's very important to understand about sampling when it comes to quality control. The table that's showing, it shows if you want a certainty of 95%, certainty factor is 1.96. This table is set as a standard. يعني you take these numbers as a standard that you can use in your calculation. To that point, يعني want to reiterate, the certainty factor donates how certain you want to be that the sample data does not include variation. Does not include variation. يعني it represents the actual whole population. It represents 50,000 invoice, باخذ 100 sample. I want to talk about this 100 invoice as I'm talking about the 50,000 invoice. Okay, going back to the EDI system that I talked about, which is implementing an invoice system. If I accept 95% certainty that the sample invoice would contain no variation of the whole population, I can calculate based on the equation that is shown in this slide, which is sample size equal 0.25 times certainty factor acceptable error square. Okay, I can calculate the sample size that is needed by applying the equation, which is 0.25 times, if I want 95% certainty, I apply 0.25 times 1.96 divided by 5%, 0.5%, because I want desired certainty 95, then the rest to complete the 100% is 0.05. مظبوط. These are squared the total from the whole population. So I want to take 384 invoice to represent the whole population. So I will get 95% of certainty. If I want to be less certain, I will take less certainty factor, which is I want 90%. Then I apply 1.645 certainty factor into the equation. I will take smaller sampling, which in case if I do the calculation, it will be 68%. Furthermore, if I want less certainty factor, يعني ما بتكونش الsampling really representing the whole population very well, but and I'm choosing the desired certainty factor. I want مثلا 80%, the calculation will be less invoice I have to examine to come up with the conclusion. This is all what I want to tell you about the statistical sampling. Just to give you an idea, and we're not going to give you an assignment on this, but I want you to take away there is statistical sampling using inequality measure, and there is a way to calculate the satisfied sampling size compared to the whole population size. And there is an equation that we used, and the concept of statistical sampling, uh, you must know certainty factor, which how you want to be certain that the sampling represent the whole population, and how is the standard deviation is and what is the variability around the statistical sample. Clear? Hope we don't have any question.